Hello, my name is Polina Lukina. I am a participant of the Place of Art project. Place of Art is a research project focused on the history of contemporary art exhibitions in Russia. In our project, we explore a wide range of problems, among which one of the most important is the problem of curating. Now we are presenting a mini conference at exhibition as a means of analysis of contemporaneity, ethics and politics of exhibitions, that is focused on how contemporary art nowadays is implemented through the exhibition process. This mini conference is a part of a bigger conference held by High School of Economics, and that is called Theories and Practices of Art and Design. Our session is held in online format. During June, we will upload a series of video presentations with panel participants. And after that, we are planning to arrange a roundtable. Today, the Place of Art project is also presented by Natalia Smolyanskaya. She is an artist, curator, and head of the Place of Art workshop. And we are pleased to introduce our guest, Nicola Oduro, curator and former director of Saint-Fons Art Center in France. Nicola will present his report, Spaces for Debate, based on his experience in this institution. Nicola, nice to meet you.
It's nice.
Let's begin. And thank you for inviting me for this talk. As you said, I'm a curator and former director of Le near Lyon in France, which I run since 2016. And I left my director's position just before the lockdown, actually. And first, I think I'd like to give you some aspects of the context of the city of Saint-Fons to understand the whole landscape. The art center of Saint-Fons is located on the outskirts of the city of Lyon in France, in the southern suburbs of Saint-Fons itself, named Les Clochettes. So to speak, in the southern suburbs of Lyon. Let me show you the art center from the outside, just to have a look. Yep. You see? Let me know.
Not yet.
Not you sure?
Yes.
Okay. So the art center has its location and the presence of contemporary art in this peculiar neighborhood, Les Clochettes, is really not obvious for anyone, neither for the inhabitants, who often live in a kind of emergency situation, nor for art lovers for whom the place is really not charming and does not correspond to the expected image of a contemporary art center. And I don't think that we have more legitimacy than the inhabitants themselves to speak up. And I would say even to speak about art, or even to speak about contemporary art. Because something I didn't want was to bring this strange idea, to bring good art in a bad neighborhood. We have to consider that everyone carries their cultures and art with them. And I love contemporary art a lot, but I wasn't there to go on crusade to evangelize to contemporary art. So we decided to work from the city's context and its inhabitants, from their cultures, from their questions, and to invite artists who were able to grasp the context, to stimulate the debate, and invite inhabitants themselves to speak up. So yeah, I should say that we created spaces for debate. Saint-Fons is a city, and the context is very important, with a big industrial history, beginning in the late middle 19th century. And you can see a map with in the center the location of the art center, and very close to a huge chemical valley, which is a historical landscape for industrial activities. So Saint-Fons has this history, but it's also with a geographical, social, and economical complexity, due mainly to deindustrialization, ecological risks due to this chemical valley I show you, with a lot of factories, and also migration processes. But I don't want to make it worse, and the presence of artists was neither for creating beauty nor to emphasize the drama of the context or life of the inhabitants. So local issues were focused through specific projects, echoing the situation and context-related collaboration with artists based on social commitments with local communities. Artists like Kристиана Ньямпета, Lars Kussner and Cassius Fadlaby, Lara Almarsegui, or Juliana Racco answered my invitation. We also made the first solo show of Taous Makhacheva, and the first solo show in France of Aslan Gaysumov, Domenech, Nicola de Georgis, and others. And I made several curatorial projects based on emptiness. And you can see a photo of the neighborhood of Les Minguettes, very close to the art center. And it was also an investigation-based project of Domenech. So I made several projects based on decrease, economic slowdown also, and this is an image of a performance of Jan Budaj in an exhibition I made about the urban context of the art center, really the context around and how to play with space. And this is a piece of Richard Maguire and a piece of Raphael Zarka. So project based on multiplicity of languages also, which is a very huge aspect of Les Clochettes, all based on the power of art and cross-cutting practices for, let's say, negotiating the world and creating new narratives. And you can see quite empty space of the art center, full of Xerox. And it was a project I made based on emptiness and the vanishing, the absence of artwork at all. And it was a kind of a statement. But I have to say that, moreover, Le Cap Art Center is a public art center attached to the city hall of Saint-Fons. And as such, the activities of the art center constitutes a public service addressed firstly to the inhabitants of the city. And it's a very important point because it pushes me to think art and artist interventions in a public space as a common will, as a respublica, as we say it in Latin. So to speak, a public thing, something we have in common. Oh, sorry, we have an acceleration of the images. And to twist the words of McLuhan, the medium is the message, I should say that the context was the project, but what was the curatorial approach? Let's say that Les Clochettes, and including the art center itself, is not a place of art per se. And I really doubt about the term of place of art, but I'm not sure that it really exists. But more than that, it's a complex and harsh place for artists. It's also a very stimulating place where, with a specific approach, let's say that art can take place. And the idea was to escape the restricted approach of a space where we would suppose to see art inside, for experimenting a war context in which we could learn to do things and think differently outside. And I will show you two projects, and I apologize because they are a bit different than the project you have in the website, I think I mentioned initially, but I will show you the proposal of Kристиана Ньямпета and the project of Metanation Embassy, l'ambassade de la Métanation. When I came to work at Le Cap Art Center, I started to do very empty exhibitions, and I show you the last pictures of this exhibition that I called La Décroissance, decrease. And it was a kind of statement to say that I won't show art in a way. I won't show objects displayed, art objects displayed in a space, but new narratives. So when Kристиана Ньямпета accepted my invitation for a solo show in summer 2017, it was a continuation of this aesthetics of empty space full of words. If you want to see more about the exhibitions of Le Cap Art Center, you can. I invite you to have a look on the website and Facebook and Instagram pages. Kристиана Ньямпета, his project named Radius Station was, at the name clearly explained, radio station. Radius was an environment full of furnitures, tables, chairs, and libraries, and a large system of recording the discussion, the conversation we had in this space, but globally an empty space that everyone had to fill with his presence. And the project of Kристиана Ньямпета was very inspired by, sorry for the noise from the outside, I'm working at home, so it's a pity. The project was very inspired by the living togetherness from the lectures of Roland Barthes at Collège de France, how to live together in 76, 77. And I have to also precise and to add that Kристиана Ньямпета is an artist from Rwanda who escaped from the civil war. And he works with the philosophical idea or concept of forgiveness. So part of the project in Saint-Fons, Christian asked me to investigate through the history of Saint-Fons and its traumas. And I discovered that a key figure of the critic of the French politics in Africa, and especially in Rwanda, actually worked for more than 20 years in Saint-Fons. François-Xavier Verschave, who wrote a lot of books on the French involvement in maintaining African dictatorships, and in the genocide of the Tutsi people in Rwanda especially. And the question about these key figures from this specific territory, Saint-Fons, was how, this is François-Xavier Verschave, how is it possible that a man who was hugely engaged in these questions of lack of justice, lack of democracy, and not only in Africa, but he was also hugely engaged in Saint-Fons itself about those questions. And he worked in the financial service of the city hall of Saint-Fons. So he was also engaged in this idea of social, of public service. And how is it possible that this man had been largely forgotten in Saint-Fons? So we decided to organize discussions about the work and the role of François-Xavier Verschave and his role in the small history of Saint-Fons, and also in the big history of decolonization. And we made a lot of discussions in this empty space full of words. We danced, we cooked also, and but these peculiar discussions was maybe more intense than others on this in this context and about the context itself. The second project I wanted to talk about is the MetaNation Embassy, l'ambassade de la MetaNation. L'ambassade de la MetaNation is a project proposed by Monica Espina and Claire Dehove. Monica Espina is a playwright and theater director, and Claire Dehove is a theoretician and art historian. And they proposed this project more than a year before, and we made it last year from September to November 2019. And their idea was to transform the art center into a fictional embassy. The art space disappeared behind the identity of the embassy itself. And for more than 2 months, the team of the art center and I played the role of the representatives of the MetaNation Embassy. In this environment, visitors were invited to play a test, to interpret game cards like tarot game cards, but with symbolic images about nature about gender fluidity, about politics, about discrimination, or sex violence, and other matters that are relevant in our today contemporary lives. And in order to reveal the visitors' meta-nations profile, and also to get a passport by the end of this interpretation and gameplay, and to join with this delivery of a passport to join the open society of the meta-nation itself, which is an utopian but effective society of symbiotic lives and let's say respect for each other. And I don't know if you can see, but this is my own passport of the meta-nation. And in this space, we also danced quite a lot, and we cooked. Also, we played theater, and we got drunk, and we talked loudly, and but the whole space was really a space for debating the world outside, for debating the close environment of the inhabitants themselves, of the inhabitants of Saint-Fons, and to reappropriate a key and a way to think their environment. And to make a comment on, on these two examples, I would say that the artists, the creator, the institution, the public service, also everyone gave to the inhabitants back their voices, and gave the possibility to use their voices to figure out their environments differently. And in this context, and with these projects, we can see art, I think, as a vehicle and not art as an end or a purpose in itself. We started from this idea of common art, that is to say something very simple we can share, just to share a way of looking at the space itself, for instance, to get through the idea of an art in common. That is to say something we could share back with the aim of an empowerment of each other. But it's for the institution itself, it's really a challenge to take in consideration such a context, which is really harsh and tough. In conclusion, I would say that once more, from my point of view, there is no place of art per se, as I said, but there is an art for each place, and okay, as long as we are allowed to speak up, of course. And I think that this idea of an art for each place pushes us to listen to our environment in a very good way. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Nicola.
I think we will continue with a few questions.
Yes.
I will ask the first one.
Yes. I would like to ask you, have you been guided by the experience of other curators, projects, or institutions? For example, the idea of a social turn described by Claire Bishop, or dialogical aesthetic and collaborative practices that Grant Kester talked about. Do you think those terms reflect what you do?
Yes. Yeah, of course. Of course, Claire Bishop is important for her critique of the relational aesthetics and Grant Kester for this idea of community and communication in art history. But I was much more inspired by texts by Simon Scheck, for instance, or even by A.L. Weizmann from forensic architecture, and by Donna Haraway, obviously. And if we speak about institutions, so I was really inspired by, and I could say fascinated by, the experience of Maria Lind when she was director of Tensta Konsthalle in the north of Stockholm. But I also think that every context must be carefully considered, and you cannot apply a method that would have worked elsewhere, even it's a good artist project. It must always be re-evaluated according to the context.
Thank you. And I would like to ask you, how did you choose artists for these projects or other projects? Did you choose those artists who worked directly with social issues before?
I worked with artists I loved. And I respect and I knew that they were okay, it's obvious. But I first have to say that I proceeded to a kind of an expertise of the city, of the site itself, around the art center, the context, the whole context. And I observed and learned a lot by talking to specialists, town planners, or sociologists, inhabitants, and associations, of course. And also, I observed and learned a lot by talking to people around the art center. And after that, and only after that, I made invitations to artists that I knew they were able to do good projects in this context. Artists that were able to take in consideration all those aspects, or part of this aspect, the aspect of the city, but this ability of taking in consideration. And that was the case with Domenic, for instance, who worked on the urbanization of Les Minguettes, which is a district very close to the art center, and built in the early 70s. That was also the case with Juliana Racco, who organized incredible workshop with more than 80 children. And but I have to say that my intention wasn't to work only with social issues. And I think that we made projects with a large range of aesthetic approaches, but always trying to work with the context.
Thank you.
Thank you. And I have also questions. What is the role of local residents in the project? Was it an equal dialogue, or did the artists speak on behalf of those people?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm very careful about this issue. Yeah, it was always, and I think it's a bad option to speak for others. And I'm really inspired by a text by Linda Alcoff, The Problem of Speaking for Others. But that does not mean that we cannot speak at all. And I think that you get something more shared and more generous when you manage to get people to talk by themselves, and eventually with their voices, even when artists, they haven't necessarily to be here.
Thank you. And I think I'll ask the last question. Did you involve in these projects people of specific professions, for example, sociologists, social or inclusive workers, etc., who usually work with people and social issues, if I say so? And was there any study of social impact of these projects?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. The second part of your question is a bit tough. Yes, we did involve people from a large scale of competences, and as I always already said, we worked with geologists and architects for the project of La Halle Marseille, for example, or teachers and kids learning French as a foreign language for the project of La Halle of Julian Arago, or an helicopter company for the film of Lars Kussner and Cassius Fadlabi. And we worked with a lot of association from Saint-Fons. And the purpose of the artist was not always social commitment. And I think it's important, but we tried to evaluate the social impacts of projects such as Julian Arago, or of course Kристиана Ньямпета, but it's neither a question of number of visitors, nor a question of enthusiasm, even if it's very important. And sometimes we have an impressive feedback years after the project. And we also have to take in mind, I think, the social workers' criteria. But we cannot do artistic project working only with these criteria, and we are definitely not social workers, but curators and artists, and our role is to find new paths, new narratives.
Thank you, Nicola. Thank you for your report. Thank you for joining us for our mini conference. Just very interesting and inspiring conversation, I think. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.